casting pale shadows across rows of empty desks. It was past midnight on a Thursday, and the 42nd floor was silent except for the soft clicking of a single keyboard. Emma Bennett sat hunched over her computer, her dark blonde hair falling loose from the bun she had tied that morning. Or was it yesterday morning? She could no longer remember. Her eyes burned as they scanned the financial projections for the 100th time. The merger proposal had to be perfect. It had to be flawless. Not because anyone would praise her work, because she knew that lives depended on it. Jobs, families, futures. The weight of responsibility sat heavy on her shoulders. Even though her name would never appear on the final presentation, Emma had been with Sterling Industries for 3 years. 3 years of arriving early and leaving late. 3 years of catching mistakes that would have cost millions. 3 years of being the invisible force that kept the machinery running smoothly. Her colleagues barely knew her name. Her supervisor took credit for her ideas. And Alexander Sterling, the brilliant CEO who had built this empire from nothing, probably did not even know she existed. She told herself it did not matter. The work mattered. Making a difference mattered. Being seen was a luxury she had learned to live without. But tonight, her body was staging a rebellion. Her hands trembled as they moved across the keyboard. The numbers on the screen began to blur and swim. A sharp pain pierced through her temples, and her breath came in shallow gasps. She had not eaten since breakfast the day before, had not slept in 72 hours, had not stopped working since the emergency meeting on Monday. When she learned the merger deadline had been moved up, Emma pushed back from her desk, trying to stand. The room tilted violently. Her vision darkened at the edges, creeping inward like a closing iris. She reached for the desk to steady herself, but her fingers found only air. The floor rushed up to meet her, and then there was nothing but darkness. Somewhere in that darkness, she heard a voice, deep, concerned, gentle in a way that seemed impossible for someone like him. "I need you." The words wrapped around her like a warm blanket, pulling her back from the void. But they made no sense. Nobody needed her. She was replaceable, invisible. Just another name on the payroll that no one would miss. When consciousness returned, Emma found herself lying on the leather couch in the executive lounge. A suit jacket was draped over her like a blanket, and the scent of expensive cologne surrounded her. She blinked slowly, trying to piece together what had happened. The last thing she remembered was standing up from her desk. "You were awake." Emma's heart stopped. That voice. She knew that voice from company meetings and video conferences. It was the voice that commanded boardrooms and silenced doubters. Alexander Sterling was standing by the window, his back to her, hands in his pockets as he gazed out at the city lights below. She tried to sit up too quickly, and the room spun again. Strong hands caught her shoulders, steadying her. Alexander had moved with surprising speed, and now he was kneeling beside the couch, his gray eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Easy," he said softly. "You have been unconscious for 20 minutes. I called the company doctor. She will be here soon." "I am fine," Emma managed, though her voice was weak. "I just need to finish the merger analysis." Something flickered across Alexander's face. Anger? Concern? It was gone before she could identify it. "The merger analysis can wait." "When did you last eat?" Emma opened her mouth to answer, then realized she could not remember. "I have been busy." "When did you last sleep?" She looked away, unable to meet his gaze. There was a lot to do. Alexander stood abruptly and walked to the small refrigerator in the corner. He returned with a bottle of water and a protein bar, pressing them into her hands. "Eat, drink, that is not a request." There was something in his tone that brooked no argument. Emma took a small sip of water, then a bite of the protein bar. Her stomach crumbled gratefully, reminding her just how empty it was. "Why are you here so late?" she asked between bites. "Company gossip," said Alexander, kept vampiric hours. But she had never expected to actually encounter him during one of her late-night sessions. "I could ask you the same question." He settled into the chair across from her, his posture deceptively relaxed. "But I already know the answer. You have been here every night this week." "Every night last week, too." "The security logs do not lie." Emma's cheeks flushed. The work needed to be done by you. Alone until you collapsed? His voice was sharp now, and she flinched. But then he sighed, and some of the hardness left his expression. Do you know how many errors I found in the merger proposal when I reviewed it tonight? Her heart sank. All those hours, all that effort, and she had still failed. I am sorry. I will fix them right away. There were no errors, Emma. She blinked, confused. Then why? Because your work is the only reason this merger has a chance of succeeding. Alexander leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Do you know how many people at this company actually understand the full scope of what we are trying to accomplish? 3. You are one of them. The words did not make sense. How did he even know her name? But I am just an analyst. I am not even senior level. You are Emma Bennett. You have a degree in economics from a state school that you paid for yourself while working 2 jobs. You started here as a data entry clerk and taught yourself advanced financial modeling by staying late and studying the work of the analysts above you. You have caught 47 critical errors in the past year alone. Errors that your supervisors tried to take credit for identifying. Emma stared at him, stunned. How do you know all that? Because I pay attention. Alexander held her gaze, and for the first time, Emma saw past the intimidating CEO exterior to something more human underneath. I know every person who works for me. Their strengths, their potential. And I know who the real talent is, even when they try to hide in the shadows. I was not hiding, Emma protested weakly. He tilted his head, studying her. You arrive before anyone else and leave after everyone is gone. You never speak up in meetings, even when you know the answer. You let others take credit for your ideas. You have made yourself invisible, Emma. The question is why? She wanted to look away but found she could not. Those gray eyes held her captive, seeing far more than she wanted them to see, because it is easier that way. No expectations. No disappointments. If people do not notice you, they cannot let you down. Understanding dawned on Alexander's face, followed by something that looked almost like pain. Someone hurt you badly. It was not a question, but Emma answered anyway. My father. He was a professor, brilliant and charismatic. Everyone loved him. He promised me the world, told me I was special, that we would do great things together, where she laughed bitterly. Then he left when I was 12. Just walked out one day and never came back. Turns out I was not special enough to stay for. That is not how it works, Alexander said quietly. When people leave, it is about them, not you. Maybe. Emma took another sip of water, buying time to compose herself. But it taught me a valuable lesson. Better to not be noticed at all than to be noticed and then forgotten. Silence stretched between them. The city glittered beyond the windows, thousands of lights marking thousands of lives, all unaware of this moment unfolding in the executive lounge. I heard you, Emma said suddenly. When I fainted. You said something. Alexander went very still. What did you hear? You said you needed me. She watched his face carefully. Did you really say that, or was I dreaming? For a long moment, he did not answer. Then he stood and walked back to the window, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the city lights. When he finally spoke, his voice was so low she almost missed it. I said it, and I meant it. Emma's heart began to race. But you do not even know me, do I not? He turned to face her, and the vulnerability in his expression took her breath away. I know you work harder than anyone else here. I know you care about doing things right, not just doing them fast. I know you see the human cost behind every decision, every number, every projection. That is rare, Emma. Precious. And yes, I need that. This company needs that. I need you. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning neither of them was quite ready to examine. The doctor arrived then, breaking the spell. And Alexander retreated back into his CEO persona as Emma was examined and declared. Healthy, but severely exhausted. But as Emma finally gathered her things to go home, as Alexander walked her to her car despite her protests, as their eyes met one last time in the parking garage, something had fundamentally shifted. The invisible woman had been seen. and the untouchable CEO had revealed a crack in his armor. Neither of them knew it yet. But that night marked the beginning of everything. The Monday morning sun streamed through the glass walls of Sterling Industries, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. Emma arrived at her usual early hour, but this time her presence felt different. The security guard nodded to her with recognition. The cleaning staff smiled as she passed. It was as if her collapse had somehow made her visible to people who had looked through her for years, but nothing compared to what happened when she stepped off the elevator onto the 42nd floor. Alexander Sterling was standing by the coffee station, something she had never witnessed in 3 years of working there. He was pouring himself a cup when he noticed her, and for a brief moment, his carefully controlled expression softened. "Emma, good morning." His voice was professional, but there was warmth underneath that had not been there before Friday night. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling." She tried to keep her own voice steady, hyper-aware that several earlier arriving colleagues were watching this exchange with undisguised curiosity. "Alexander, please. And I trust you actually went home and slept this weekend." Heat crept up her neck. "Yes, I did. Thank you for your concern." He nodded, satisfied, and returned to his office. But Emma could feel the stares burning into her back as she made her way to her desk. By lunchtime, the whispers had started. By Tuesday, they had evolved into full-blown speculation. By Wednesday, Emma could not walk through the break room without conversations stopping mid-sentence. The attention was suffocating. This was exactly what she had spent years avoiding. But what disturbed her more was how often she found herself looking toward Alexander's office, wondering if he was looking back. The merger negotiations intensified that week. Emma found herself pulled into high-level meetings, her analysis requested by name. Each time Alexander asked for her input, she felt the weight of hostile stares from senior analysts who had been with the company twice as long. Richard Chen, her direct supervisor, who had taken credit for her work countless times, was particularly cold. "Careful you do not get too comfortable," Richard muttered to her after one meeting. "CEOs have favorites all the time, until they do not." Emma tried to ignore him, but the words burrowed under her skin. Was that all this was? A temporary fascination that would fade as quickly as it had appeared. On Thursday evening, most of the staff had left for a company mixer at a downtown bar. Emma had declined the invitation, preferring the quiet of the empty office. She was deep into reviewing contract terms when she sensed someone behind her. "You should have gone to the mixer." Alexander's voice was gentle. Almost concerned, she turned to find him leaning against the cubicle wall. His tie loosened and his expression more relaxed than she had ever seen during business hours. "I had work to finish. There will always be work to finish. That is not the same as living your life." He moved closer, glancing at her screen. "Besides, that analysis can wait until morning. Come with me." "Where?" Emma asked, suspicious but intrigued. "You will see." Against her better judgment, she followed him to the elevator. But instead of going down, he pressed the button for the roof. When the doors opened, Emma gasped. The roof had been transformed into a garden oasis, complete with comfortable seating areas, soft lighting, and a view of the city that took her breath away. "I did not know this was up here," she whispered. "Most people do not. I had it designed 2 years ago." Alexander walked to the edge, where a low wall provided safety while preserving the view. "Sometimes I need to remember why I built all this, what it is supposed to be for." Emma joined him, keeping a careful distance between them. The city sprawled below, a river of lights and life and possibility. "It is beautiful. It is lonely." The words came out so quietly she almost missed them. Alexander did not look at her, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Do you know what it is like, Emma, to have everything you thought you wanted and realize it means nothing?" She thought of her tiny apartment, her non-existent social life, her years of invisible labor. "Maybe not in the same way, but I understand loneliness." "I built this company from nothing," Alexander continued, and Emma recognized that he was not really talking to her so much as finally speaking truths he had kept locked away. "I was 23, arrogant, full of ideas about changing the world. I trusted people, believed in partnerships and loyalty. Then my business partners tried to force me out. My investors attempted a hostile takeover. The woman I loved left me for one of those same partners. She told me I was too idealistic, too naive. That money was all that mattered. Emma's heart ached for him. She had heard rumors of Alexander's ruthless reputation, his cold efficiency, his refusal to let anyone close. Now she understood where it came from. So you stopped trusting people. I stopped being foolish. He finally turned to look at her, and the pain in his eyes was raw. I rebuilt everything alone, crushed my enemies, made sure no one could ever hurt me again. I surrounded myself with employees, not friends, business relationships, not personal ones. It was safer that way, was it? Emma asked softly. Or was it just another kind of prison? Alexander studied her face, and she saw the moment her words hit home. You see too much. Maybe, or maybe I just recognized the same walls I built around myself. She took a deep breath, gathering courage. You asked me why I made myself invisible. I could ask you the same thing. You are the most visible person in this company, but nobody really knows you. Is that so different? Silence fell between them, heavy with recognition. Two people who had protected themselves in opposite ways, suddenly seeing their reflection in each other. When I found you collapsed over those reports, Alexander said quietly, do you know what I thought? I thought that here was someone who actually cared. Not about impressing me or getting ahead, but about doing something meaningful. And I realized I had not met anyone like that in 10 years. Maybe longer. Emma's breath caught. Alexander, I know this is complicated. I know there are power dynamics in company policies and 1,000 reasons why this conversation should not be happening. He moved closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. But I need you to know that when I said I needed you, it was not about work. Or it was not just about work. For the first time in a decade, I met someone who made me want to trust again. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was dangerous territory. This could destroy the fragile professional relationship they had built. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw not the intimidating CEO, but a man who had been hurt and was choosing vulnerability anyway. I am scared, she admitted. People always leave, or they take what they need and forget you existed. I cannot survive being noticed and then dismissed. It would break something in me, I know. His hand moved slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I am scared too. Terrified, actually. But maybe that means this matters. Maybe it is supposed to be scary. Before Emma could respond, both their phones buzzed simultaneously. Alexander pulled his out first, and his expression darkened as he read the message. What is wrong? Emma asked, already dreading the answer. The merger. Someone leaked confidential terms to our competitors. They are threatening to undercut our offer. He was already moving toward the elevator, his moment of vulnerability locked away behind the CEO mask. I need to call an emergency meeting. Emma's stomach dropped. This was exactly the kind of crisis that could destroy months of work. As they rode the elevator down, her mind raced through the limited number of people who had access to those terms. The list was very short, and she was on it. The emergency meeting was brutal. The executive team gathered in the main conference room, tension crackling through the air like electricity. Richard Chen was already there, along with the CFO, the head of legal. And 3 senior VPs, Alexander stood at the head of the table. His expression carved from stone. Someone in this room betrayed this company, he said without preamble. The leaked information came from our secure server, which means it was someone with executive-level access. Eyes immediately shifted to Emma. She was the newest person with that level of clearance. The outsider who had suddenly gained the CEO's favor. Richard Chen did not even try to hide his accusatory stare. I did not do this, Emma said firmly, though her voice shook. Of course you would say that, Richard sneered. You have been working late nights, alone with unrestricted access. The timing is certainly convenient. That is enough. Alexander's voice cracked like a whip. We will review the access logs before making accusations. But Emma could see the doubt creeping into faces around the table. Even Alexander looked troubled, and why would he not be? He had just confessed to wanting to trust again. Now his trust was being tested in the most brutal way possible. The IT department was called in, logs were pulled, and there, in black and white, was evidence of someone accessing the confidential files from Emma's login credentials at 2 a.m. the previous night. Emma's blood ran cold. That is impossible. I was home asleep. Someone must have stolen my password. Or you are lying, Richard said smugly. Face it, Emma. You got caught. The room erupted in accusations and defensive arguments, but through it all, Emma felt Alexander's gaze on her. This was his moment of truth. Would he trust her? Or would he retreat back into the safety of suspicion? Then Alexander did something that shocked everyone in the room. He stood, walked around the table, and positioned himself directly beside Emma. Miss Bennett is not the leak, he said with absolute certainty. How can you possibly know that? The CFO demanded. Because I know her work. I know her character. And I know that if she were going to betray this company, she would not be stupid enough to use her own login credentials to do it. Alexander's gaze swept the room. Someone set her up, and I want to know who. The meeting devolved into chaos after that, but Emma barely heard any of it. Alexander had believed her. Without proof, without certainty, he had chosen to trust. It was the bravest thing she had ever witnessed. Later, after the room had cleared and I'd been tasked with tracing the real source of the leak, Emma found Alexander alone in his office. He was standing by the window again, his posture tense with barely controlled emotion. Thank you, she said simply. He turned, and the raw emotion on his face made her knees weak. Do not thank me for doing what should have been obvious. You are not capable of that kind of betrayal. You did not have to believe me. Given your past, it would have been easier to assume the worst. But wrong. He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides. Emma, I meant what I said on the roof. I am done protecting myself from possibilities. I am done letting fear make my decisions. If I am going to start trusting again, it starts with you. Tears pricked her eyes. What if they are right? What if I am not worth the risk? Then we will fail together. His hands cupped her face with infinite gentleness. But I do not think we will fail. I think we might actually save each other. Ah! And then he kissed her. Not with the desperate urgency of passion, but with the tender certainty of a choice being made, a wall being torn down, a heart deciding to risk everything. When they finally pulled apart, Emma was crying and smiling at the same time. This is crazy. This could ruin both our careers. Probably, Alexander agreed, his thumb wiping away her tears. But I have spent 10 years building an empire alone. I do not want to spend the next 10 the same way. Do you? Emma thought of her empty apartment, her invisible existence, her carefully constructed walls. Then she thought of this man who saw her, truly saw her, and chose her anyway despite his own fears. No, she whispered. I do not want that either. Outside the office windows, the city glittered with possibility. Inside, 2 people who had spent years protecting themselves finally took the terrifying step of letting someone in. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, office politics, and difficult conversations. But for the first time and longer than either could remember, they would not face those challenges alone. The investigation into the security breach consumed the following week. IT discovered that Emma's credentials had been cloned through a sophisticated phishing attack, one that required inside knowledge of company systems. The trail led investigators to Richard Chen, who had been accepting payments from a competitor in exchange for strategic information. His arrest sent shockwaves through Sterling Industries. Emma should have felt vindicated. Instead, she felt exhausted. The stress of being falsely accused, combined with the intense scrutiny of her relationship with Alexander, had taken its toll. Everywhere she went, people whispered. Some called her a gold digger. Others said she had manipulated the CEO with feminine wiles. A few even suggested the entire security breach had been staged to cover up their inappropriate relationship. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning. Emma arrived at her desk to find an anonymous note tucked under her keyboard. Sleeping your way to the top. Have some self-respect. Her hands trembled as she stared at the cruel words. 3 years of silent dedication, and this was how people saw her now. Not as the analyst who had saved the company millions, not as the person who worked harder than anyone else. Just as another woman using her body to get ahead, she was still staring at the note when Alexander appeared beside her desk. One look at her face, and his expression darkened. What happened? Wordlessly, she handed him the note. She watched his jaw clench, watched fury flash across his features before he controlled it. Come with me, he said quietly. Please. Emma followed him to his office, numb. She had known this would be difficult, but she had not anticipated how much the judgment would hurt, how exposed and vulnerable she would feel. Alexander closed the door and turned to face her. I am going to find out who wrote this, and they will be terminated immediately. This is harassment, and I will not tolerate it. It does not matter who wrote it, Emma said dully. They are all thinking it. You saw the looks in the conference room. Everyone believes I am using you. Then they are fools, are they? She finally met his eyes, and the pain in hers made him flinch. Look at the situation objectively, Alexander. I was nobody. Then I caught your attention, and suddenly I have access to executive meetings. People are not wrong to be suspicious. The optics are terrible. I do not care about optics. I care about you, but I care. The words burst out of her, loud and anguished. I care that people think I am a manipulator. I care that my 3 years of hard work mean nothing now. I care that being with you has made me more visible in exactly the way I never wanted to be visible. Alexander's face went pale. What are you saying? Emma wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm office. I am saying maybe this was a mistake. Maybe we moved too fast. Maybe I should request a transfer to another department or another company entirely. Put some distance between us until people forget. Alexander's voice was sharp now, hurt bleeding through. You want people to forget about us? I want my work to matter again. Emma's voice broke. I want to be respected for what I do, not judged for who I am sleeping with. And right now, being with you has cost me that. Has cost me everything I worked so hard to build. Silence fell between them, heavy and painful. Alexander stared at her as if she had struck him. Then slowly, the walls she had watched him tear down began to rebuild themselves. His expression closed off, became distant. I see, he said quietly. This is what I get for trusting again. For believing that someone might actually want me for more than what I could give them. That is not fair, Emma protested. This is not about using you. This is about protecting myself. By running away. By letting other people's judgments dictate your choices? His voice was bitter now. I thought you were braver than that, Emma. I thought we were braver than that together. The accusation stung because it was true. She was running. Choosing the safety of invisibility over the risk of being seen. It was what she had always done, what she had promised herself she would stop doing. But before she could respond, Alexander's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his expression shifted from hurt to alarm. I have to take this. It is the hospital. Emma's anger evaporated instantly. What is wrong? Alexander was already answering, his voice tense. This is Alexander Sterling. Yes. What? The color drained from his face. I will be there in 20 minutes. He hung up and stood frozen for a moment, and Emma saw genuine fear in his eyes. My sister. She was in a car accident. They do not know if she will make it. Every petty concern fled Emma's mind. She moved without thinking, grabbing her purse and his car keys from the desk. Let us go. I will drive. You do not have to do that. You just said, that does not matter right now. What matters is getting you to the hospital. We can fight about everything else later. Something in Alexander's eyes softened, just for a moment, before the fear returned. They rushed to the parking garage, and Emma drove while Alexander made tense phone calls, coordinating with doctors and family members she had not known he had at the hospital. Emma witnessed a side of Alexander she had never seen. He was frantic, desperate, his control completely shattered. His younger sister Natalie, it turned out, was the one person he had allowed himself to love unreservedly. She was an artist, free-spirited and kind. The opposite of his controlled world. When the doctor finally emerged with cautiously good news, Natalie would survive. Though her recovery would be long, Alexander actually collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands. Emma sat beside him, not touching, not speaking, just present. "She is all I have left," he said finally, his voice raw. "Our parents died when I was 25, and she was 18. I raised her while building the company. Every ruthless decision, every wall I built, it was to protect her, to make sure she would never have to struggle the way we did. Alexander. And the irony is that she's been telling me for years to let people in, to stop being so afraid. She was excited when I told her about you." He laughed bitterly. "She said it was about time I found someone who scared me in a good way." "I scare you? Terrify me." Finally looked at her, and the vulnerability in his expression was devastating. "Because you matter. Because losing you would actually hurt. And I built my entire life around not feeling that kind of pain again." Emma understood then. They were the same. Two people so afraid of being hurt that they had chosen not to feel at all. She had made herself invisible. He had made himself untouchable. Both strategies had kept them safe, and both had kept them desperately alone. "I do not want to transfer," she said softly. "I do not want to run away. I'm just scared that I'm not strong enough for this. For being visible, being judged, being vulnerable. Then we will be scared together." Alexander took her hand, his grip tight. "Emma, I cannot promise that people will not gossip. I cannot protect you from every cruel comment or suspicious look. But I can promise that you will never face it alone. That your work will speak for itself because I will make sure everyone sees what I see. And that if people cannot respect you for the brilliant, dedicated person you are, then they do not belong at my company." Tears streamed down Emma's face. "That is a lot of promises. I am a man of my word." They sat in the hospital waiting room as evening turned to night, their hands clasped together. Alexander told her about Natalie, about their childhood, about the dreams he had given up to build his empire. Emma told him about her father, about the little girl who had learned that love meant disappointment, about the woman who had tried to protect herself by disappearing. "I do not want to disappear anymore," Emma whispered as the first light of dawn crept through the windows. "But I do not know how to be seen without armor." "Neither do I," Alexander admitted. "But maybe that is the point. Maybe we figure it out together." When they were finally allowed to see Natalie, Emma hung back, knowing this was a private family moment. But Natalie, bruised and broken, but smiling, waved her over. "You must be Emma," she said, her voice hoarse. "The woman who finally got through my brother's ridiculous walls, barely," Emma said with a shaky laugh. "Hey, barely is better than nobody else has managed in 10 years. Natalie squeezed Alexander's hand. "Do not mess this up, big brother. Good ones are hard to find."
"I know,"
Alexander said, looking at Emma. "Believe me, I know." The weeks that followed were not easy. Emma returned to work to face the same gossip, the same judgment. But this time, Alexander was beside her in ways that mattered. He publicly credited her work in meetings. He instituted a company-wide anti-harassment policy with real consequences. He made it clear that Emma's position was earned through merit. It's not favoritism. Slowly, grudgingly, people began to see what Alexander had seen from the beginning. Emma's analysis became required reading for executive decisions. Her insights shaped company strategy. Her tireless dedication inspired others to raise their own standards. The merger went through successfully, largely due to Emma's work in restructuring the deal after the security breach. The company celebrated with a gala event, and for the first time, Emma did not hide in the shadows. She wore a dress that made her feel beautiful, accepted Alexander's arm as they walked in together, and smiled through the whispers because she finally understood something important. Being invisible had felt safe. But it had also meant denying herself, denying her talents, her worth, her right to take up space in the world. Alexander had not rescued her from invisibility. He had simply been the first person brave enough to say out loud what she had always secretly known, that she mattered. On the balcony of the gala venue, under a sky full of stars, Alexander pulled her close. No regrets? Emma thought about the anonymous notes, the gossip, the judgment. Then she thought about lazy Sunday mornings at Natalie's bedside as she recovered, making Alexander laugh with terrible jokes. She thought about late-night strategy sessions where their minds moved in perfect sync. She thought about being seen, really seen, for the first time in her life. "Only that I did not let you see me sooner," she said. "Then we will make up for lost time." He kissed her gently. "Starting now, for however long you will have me." Emma smiled against his lips. "That might be a very long time," good Alexander murmured. "Because I need you. Not your analysis or your work ethic or your brilliant mind, though I need those too. I need you, Emma. The woman who taught me that being vulnerable is not the same as being weak. That trusting someone is not foolish, it is brave." "We're both brave now," Emma said, together, there on that balcony, with the city spread below them like a promise. The invisible woman and the untouchable CEO found what they had both been searching for all along. Not rescue, not completion, but partnership, understanding, the courage to be seen. They had each spent years building walls to protect their hearts. Now, brick by brick, they were building something else, something better, something that looked a lot like home. The gala continued inside, music and laughter drifting through the open doors. But Emma and Alexander remained on the balcony, content in their private moment. The city stretched endlessly before them, each light a story, each building a dream someone had dared to chase. "Do you remember what you said to me that night?" Emma asked, leaning against the railing. "When you found me collapsed." Alexander's arms came around her from behind, steady and warm. "I said I needed you. I thought I had imagined it, that my exhausted brain had conjured something impossible." She turned in his embrace to face him. "But you really meant it even then." "Even then," he confirmed. "Maybe especially then. Seeing you there, having given everything to work that no one else appreciated. I recognized something I had lost: passion, purpose beyond profit margins and quarterly reports. You reminded me why I started this company in the first place." Emma reached up to touch his face, still marveling that she was allowed this intimacy. "And you reminded me that being invisible was not the same as being safe. It was just another way of being lost." They stood together in comfortable silence, both reflecting on how far they had come. The journey from that night to this moment had not been simple. There had been difficult conversations with HR about their relationship, formal disclosures to ensure everything remained ethical and above board. Emma had requested an independent review of her work to prove her promotions were merit-based. The review had not only confirmed her exceptional performance, but revealed she had actually been underpaid for years relative to her contributions. Alexander had instituted new transparency measures across the company, ensuring credit went to those who earned it rather than those who claimed it loudest. The culture was slowly shifting, becoming a place where dedication mattered more than politics, where talent could rise regardless of whether it announced itself boldly or worked quietly in the shadows. "There is something I need to tell you," Alexander said, his voice taking on a nervous edge that Emma had learned to recognize. "Something I have been planning." Her heart skipped. "That sounds ominous." "Not ominous, just terrifying." He took both her hands in his. "Natalie has been asking when she gets to paint your portrait. She says you have an interesting face, which in artist speak apparently means she finds you fascinating." "What? That is your terrifying news? That your sister wants to paint me?" "That is not the terrifying part." Alexander took a deep breath. "The terrifying part is that I told her she could paint it as a wedding portrait." Time seemed to stop. Emma stared at him, certain she had misheard. "A wedding portrait? I know it is fast. I know we have only been together officially for 3 months. I know there are 1,000 practical reasons to wait." Alexander's voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly. "But Emma, I have spent 10 years being practical, being careful, protecting myself from feeling anything that might hurt. And all it got me was a decade of loneliness." He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. You've taught me that some risks are worth taking. That vulnerability is not weakness. That love is not about finding someone who will never hurt you, but finding someone worth being hurt for. Emma's vision blurred with tears as he opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring. Not ostentatious or showy, but beautiful in its understated grace. Like something chosen for someone who preferred substance over flash. I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow, Alexander continued. I am not even asking you to set a date. I am just asking if you will say yes to the possibility. To building something together, to being visible together. Two facing whatever comes next side by side instead of alone. Emma's mind raced through 1,000 thoughts. The practical concerns about workplace relationships, the fear that this happiness could not last, the old instinct to protect herself by running away. But then she thought about everything she had learned. About Natalie, who had nearly died and taught her that life was too precious to waste on fear. About Alexander, who had every reason to distrust and yet chose her anyway. About herself and the woman she was becoming. Someone who took up space. Someone who mattered. Someone brave enough to be seen. Yes, she whispered. Then louder, with more certainty. Yes. Alexander's face transformed, joy breaking through his usual composure like sunlight through clouds. He slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, and then they were kissing, laughing, crying. All at once. Inside the gala, someone noticed them through the glass doors. Within moments, applause broke out. Some of it was genuine, celebrating to people who had found each other. Some of it was polite, from people who still had doubts. But Emma discovered something important in that moment. She no longer needed universal approval. She no longer needed to be invisible to feel safe. She had Alexander's belief in her, Natalie's friendship, her own proven track record, and most importantly, her own hard-won confidence. The rest would come, or it would not. Either way, she would survive. She would thrive. They re-entered the gala together, and Emma found herself surrounded by well-wishers. Some were colleagues who had come to respect her work. Others were new connections. People who saw her not as the CEO's girlfriend, but as a rising force in her own right. When the CFO approached to discuss a project, Emma excused herself from Alexander's side to talk shop. They debated financial models and market projections with the easy confidence of equals. Alexander watched from across the room, his expression proud. Later that night, back at Alexander's penthouse, with Natalie joining them for celebratory champagne, despite her doctor's orders to take it easy, Emma felt something she had not felt in years complete. Not because Alexander completed her, not because she had found her missing half, but because she had finally found herself. The invisible woman had stepped into the light and discovered she belonged there all along. Tell me the truth, Natalie said, curled up on the couch with her leg in a cast. Did you two have some dramatic moment where everything clicked into place? Some perfect movie scene where you both realized you were meant to be? Emma and Alexander exchanged glances. They thought about the collapsed figure on a desk, the whispered confession he had not meant her to hear, the accusations and doubts and fears, the hospital waiting room where walls had finally crumbled. It was not perfect, Emma said. It was messy and scary and hard. But it was real, Alexander added, taking her hand. And real turned out to be better than perfect. Natalie raised her glass. To real love. The kind that is brave enough to be imperfect. They drank to that, and to many other things. 2 second chances and first risks. To being seen and choosing to see. To the invisible woman and the untouchable man, who had found each other in the shadows and walked into the light together. 6 months later, Emma stood in Natalie's studio, posing for the wedding portrait that would hang in their home. Through the window, she could see Sterling Industries rising against the skyline. No longer a monument to isolation, but a place where good work was recognized and talent could flourish. She was no longer invisible. She was Emma Bennett, soon to be Emma Sterling, Chief Strategy Officer, fiancé friend, a woman who had learned that the bravest thing you could do was let yourself matter. And when Alexander arrived to pick her up, when his face lit up at seeing her, when he kissed her like she was the most important thing in his world, Emma knew one thing for certain. She had been wrong all those years. Being invisible had not kept her safe. It had only kept her from living. But now, finally, she was alive. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story.